Okay, so this is going to be my reaction to yes, this is my initial reaction to Hanziyu, the cursed language of characters.
China, one of the oldest civilizations and the land of John Cena's native tongue,
Indeed.
along with many, many other languages. These languages vary widely, but they all share one common thread: the characters. Throughout history, many people have tried to standardize one of these as a lingua franca across the country, and others yet have tried to create new systems to replace those characters. The latter, however, has never succeeded because all attempts suffered from the same fundamental flaw. They created a system to write the way only one of the many languages was spoken, when they should have been speaking the way all of the languages write.
Well, technically yes, but if we are like I've done a project on this before, so the actual reason why those like phonetic writing systems like failed is mainly because of all of the homophones in the Chinese language, of course. Even if you look at, for example, Middle Chinese, homophones seems to be rarer, it still exists if you look at the bigger image. Thus, when you have all of these rhymes and consonants just merging, of course, like, the modern languages would end up with a bunch of homophones, right? So, if you replace all the context of the characters with how they are pronounced, and you spell it out phonetically, no one will fucking know which is which, right? So that's the main reason why it failed. It was because of it just wasn't a good system. Cool. Simplified Chinese.
Chinese characters, also known as Han characters, Hanzi, Kanji, or Diacao Da Se Da Ge Te, are part of a logographic writing system used to write the Chinese language,
Yeah.
along with a number of other languages influenced by the country. The earliest known version of this writing system
Oracle bone
dates back
script.
to 1200-ish BCE and is mostly pictographic.
Yeah.
The graphics are like pictos, and their appearance is directly linked to their meaning, like emoji. However, as the writing system matured,
Kind of, but no, because the old Chinese people used to do this this thing called 假借, in which it's basically when you don't have a pictograph for something that you want to represent, you take the pictograph of another character, of another thing that is pronounced similarly to the other character, and then you use the same pictograph for both of those concepts. One of the great example. So one of the examples of this would be, for example, wind, and the Chinese phoenix is what I would call it. They used to be written exactly the same in Oracle bone script because the ancient Chinese didn't really know how to represent wind with the pictograph, right? And then there's also the radical system, in which you have a phonetic part and a semantic part, which is usually the radical, but that isn't exactly always the case.
characters moved away from these pictures and became more abstract.
Yeah.
Going from person to, sure, that can be water, and then right back to absolutely 100% clear what they...
Okay, so, the exact origin of the character Biang isn't exactly, like, we don't exactly know where the character came from, but the most folks, okay, let me, okay, I can't speak English, but some say that it's actually created by the scholar who, like, traveled to Shanxi and then made up this character because he didn't have any money to pay for the noodles, right? And there's a lot of story about how, like, why the character is constructed in a certain way, right? And how this horrible mess represents biang biang noodles, right?
they mean. Along with characters getting more abstract, they also standardized. Because of this, characters often contain other characters, which are themselves made up of standardized components that can be...
I mean, this isn't a good example because in traditional Chinese, originally how it was written, the horizontal part in the middle, it was actually a heart. It's a pictograph of a heart. So this isn't made up of a heart and a friend component. This is made of a heart, and like this bottom weird component.
Other characters, which are themselves made up of...
Okay.
These base components are called radicals.
Yeah, radicals.
The radical is mostly arbitrary. In 1716, under the direction of the Kangxi Emperor, the Kangxi Dictionary was published,
Yeah.
which defined a set of 214 radicals.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
most Chinese dictionaries, the characters within it were ordered by their radical, and then further ordered by the number of strokes needed to write the character.
Okay. Huh.
While
Yeah.
this was not the first time this particular set of radicals was defined, it cemented them as the standard set to use for centuries. It's still used in some places to this day, although there's a more modern set of 201 radicals used by the Chinese government and many modern Chinese dictionaries, or for anyone else who's a big fan of using 13 less of things. Along with these radicals standardizing, so too did character stroke order, which is the order in which the strokes are written. Generally speaking, Chinese modern stroke order is based around 10 different rules. Top, bottom, then left, right, horizontal before vertical, save the big stroke till last, diagonals go right to left before left to right, symmetric characters have their insides written before their outsides, inside after outside in a box, left vertical stroke is written first in a box, bottom of a box is written last, dots and little strokes go last, and ignore rule number 2 if that vertical is actually diagonal.
Yeah.
With all of
Okay.
these rules,
I think that's a pretty good summary because I actually have no idea how Chinese stroke order works. Because I'm just like so used to a system that like I just don't think about it, right? It's just an easy way to write things. If you don't write it that way, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
each character has a correct way to write it down.
I mean, yeah.
This,
Yeah.
combined with a set of radicals,
That's what you get
fully
told in
describe
Chinese
how any
education
character
system.
is broken down and how each of its segments is written. We can even type out exactly how it's broken down with the wonders of the Unicode Consortium, also known as our emoji overlords, which in 1999 introduced 11 ideographic description sequence characters to Unicode to represent how characters are composed from one another,
Cool.
including next to each other, top, bottom, and polyespo style. So, characters are made of more characters, which are made of radicals and written with officially ordered strokes and with internationally standard ways to represent their composition. What a simple, intuitive system that we can now use to create just as intuitive of a language.
I mean, yeah.
This language is phonetic.
Like, oh, it's the wrong character, I think. It's the wrong character. And the character in the middle is the wrong character. It's missing a radical. And then, of course, they are using simplified, which is, yeah, whatever. Fucking
In the
disgusting.
simplified dialect, oh yeah, there's dialects too, is Dia Ta Dasa Dagata Belerle La Tai Het Kela. But for simplicity, I'll be
That sounds like okay. That sounds like a Thai Vietnamese Creole.
referring to it by its pronunciation in Mandarin Chinese, Hanziyu. To speak Hanziyu, a speaker simply pronounces the components of a character and then the strokes that make them up. There's many ways of analyzing Han character strokes.
I totally forgot
Hanziyu
about this
uses
part.
six-stroke analysis, which is the smallest system that can realistically describe a character. This means that so-called combining strokes are not used, and instead are represented by their most similar base stroke. Complex strokes are pronounced as their component strokes, meaning that this is represented by the two strokes na and dian. Each stroke in Hanziyu can be realized as one of 3 consonants or 3 vowels, giving us 18 consonants and 18 vowels, including diphthongs. The consonants are ma, na, nga, pa, ta.
Mananga pataka bataka. Ch, but okay, so there's ch, but there is no t. Z, j, f, s, and okay, that's alveolar palatal, but it's written in the retroflex role. So sh, h, l, but then there is also no what? Oh my fucking god! It's written with the fucking pinyin shit. No. No.
Ta, ka, ba, da, cha, za, ja, fa, sa, sha, ha, and la. And the vowels
Okay.
are za, ma, na, nga, pa, ta, ka, ba, da, cha, za, ja.
I think that was a voiced duh, not tenuous duh. Yeah.
Fa, sa, sha, ha, and la. And the vowels are I, U, U.
Ah, yes.
E,
U is written with V, of course. I, U, U, E, U, U, A.
we,
Ah.
wo, wa,
And then there's also the ya, ye, you, we, wo, wa, ao, a, I, o.
ao, a,
Cool.
I, o. This inventory is loosely based on a combination of Mandarin, Hokkien, and Cantonese, plus a healthy dose of completely disregarding any and all phonotactics from those languages.
Yes.
This means that in Hanziyu, any consonant can be put next to any vowel, but CV syllable structure is required. In
Okay.
addition to these phonemes, there's 9 tones, based on the same languages, but with a couple of
9 tones, okay? There is ah, 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 ah. What the fuck? Ah, yeah.
of extra fun distinctions, including a high-low dipping distinction and a peaking tone, giving us these 9. Ah, 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 ah.
That low mid isn't low enough. It sounds more like a mid or a high mid than a low mid. A low mid definitely lower. So it's somewhere down here. To but tones are contextual. So as long as it's a low tone, I guess it doesn't matter because there's no contrastive mid-tone.
Ah, 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 and ah. Now let's talk about
Yeah, that dipping tone wasn't low enough. It should be something closer to than ah.
To make it readable, however, there is also a romanization based on pinyin. It also adds a new vowel character for
Yeah,
and
fuck it.
and removes pinyin system of consonants changing the way vowels are produced. So this is pronounced ji rather than zhi.
Yeah, but why would you put a retroflex next to a palatal vowel? Because like retroflex and palatal is kind of they kind of naturally doesn't come together, and that's like a phenomenon in lots of languages, like including in the European languages like Russian. So like, and that also sounded like alveolar palatal than actual retroflex. So, no.
To pronounce a character, we need a list of its strokes in order. They're then split into pairs, and because we're doing linguistics, they're not just strokes, they're stroked eans. In each pair,
Cool.
the first stroke is realized as a consonant, and the second is a vowel, giving us that strict CV syllable structure we talked about before. For each of these pairs, let's call the first stroke the C stroke, and the second the V stroke. For the first stroke pair of any character, the C stroke is realized with its first consonant reading, and the V stroke by its first vowel reading, giving us k and E in this example. The tone of the vowel is based on the V stroke's position relative to the C stroke, with one tone assigned to each of the 9 possible directions. If 2 strokes in a pair touch one another, all 9 strokes can be used, but for disconnected strokes, only the 4 cardinal directions can be used. In this case, the E touches the bottom left of the character, giving us ki. For the rest of the pairs, the reading of the stroke is determined by the C stroke's position relative to the V stroke of the previous pair. This works just like choosing a tone, and also follows that touching, no touching rule. In this character, however...
Okay, what I'm going to say is that this is definitely a pretty cursed system, but also on the other hand, if you think about the premise of the video, which is in which they said that the goal of this language is to kind of unify the Chinese languages, right? I think they said that something about how people has been trying to standardize the language, and some people some people try to come up with phonetic systems of writing this language, trying to replace the Han character system, of course, the logographies. They all failed, and they should actually go the other way around. Instead of spelling the pronunciation of a single dialect, they should use the characters and pronounce it like every single dialect, if you categorize all the Sinitic languages of dialects as dialects. It does work, but because they are still very closely related, but like Sinitic dialects, Sinitic languages, same thing.
There is an exception. If the V-stroke of a pair is a hook, then the next pair's mapping is based on the C-stroke that hook was attached to, rather than the hook itself. So here, the consonant stroke of the second pair is left relative to k, meaning the pair will use C2 V1 reading, giving us pe, with the es tone in the center right position. Remember how I said there were 9 tones? That was an example of a classic linguistics technique called lying. There's also a 10th tone, pronounced like Mandarin's neutral tone, which is used when there's an odd number of strokes in a character. In this case, the last stroke is pronounced as a consonant with a neutral schwa appended. This means that the last stroke of some characters is ambiguous in its horizontal position, but that just makes it more cursed, so it's a feature, not a bug. We now technically have a complete system to pronounce a character, but simply speaking, those strokes is just way too slow. Remember Hanziyu and his radicals? Let's take those simple common characters and shorten their pronunciations a bit. The process for shortening these mainly consists of combining 2 vowels and their tones together, then either removing the second consonant, replacing its vowel with
what is that writing
or
system?
occasionally keeping the second vowel but giving it a neutral tone. Some duplications also cut out, and in shortened radicals, a h can be pronounced as a glide between the 2 vowels rather than an actual consonant. So instead of pronouncing this, we can just say, now that's efficiency. Shortened radicals are nice.
That sounds like
Radicals
cursed
are really
Southeast
meant to be
Asian
standard components
languages.
of other characters. Thanks to Unicode, we already have a way to decompose characters, so we can break down how a character is written and pronounce its pieces. To combine them, each of the 11 composition types is assigned a final like this, and surprise, I lied again! Our syllable structure is actually CVC when the syllable is at the end of the character's component because of these finals. There's also a new sound, which is just the geminated form of In some dialects, these 2 sounds are allophones, as well as all of the voicidness distinctions for the finals. With all that done, we can append these finals to each component and finally speak a full character. Oh, and as a quick side note, when in a character, a radical often doesn't look like the actual character. All of these are in fact different ways of writing the same radical, but in Hanziyu, a radical is always pronounced as the shortened form of the full character. Additionally, all radicals are based on their form in traditional Han characters, even in the simplified dialect. Well, now we can speak any character we want. All we need to do is get its full decomposition as a tree, stopping at any radicals we find and going as far as possible on the non-radical components. And for each radical, use the shortened pronunciation of its full character, and for any non-radical, we pronounce its strokes by pairing them to C and B. We read across the leaf nodes of this tree, adding a final based on the component's composition type with its next component, and bing bam boom, you got yourself a full word in Hanziyu. Easy as 继续来源我这幅这类后继续来源我必得大家 Hanziyu is based off standard written Chinese, but there's 2 key differences in vocabulary to any other Chinese languages: loanwords and compound words. Because of the 1 syllable per character rule in Chinese languages, there's a lot of homonyms. To avoid ambiguity, many nouns are actually made up of 2 words which overlap in meaning together, like 美丽 or 语言. That way, the listener can then
That pronunciation was actually not
to
bad.
get a better idea of what the speaker is talking about. This is a really clever solution, but obviously in Hanziyu, this homonym problem doesn't exist, so the second word in these kinds of compounds is just omitted.
Well, first of all, they aren't homonyms, because that suggests they have the same meaning. They are homophones, which means that they're pronounced the same, while having different meaning. Wait, actually, I'm not sure. Yeah, just go with it, I don't know.
Because Han characters are logography, the written form of loanwords in languages like Mandarin is a bit silly, giving us literal translations like Han Castle and 3 Bright Rule. Of course, no one thinks of these literal meanings, but we can do better in Hanziyu. Instead of finding characters with the pronunciation we're looking for, we can just create a completely new character based on the pronunciation. For instance, we can pronounce agma schwa as zaga ma swa and write it like this. What an elegant system, and what a perfect new logo for the Agma Schwa channel. Well, that's everything. Pronunciation, grammar changes, shortenings, graphic design consulting for Conlang and YouTube channels. I guess that means there's only one thing left to do. K 了带hiệu的这是对手 K 了这是卡就佛抓了就拆条抄都还贴着涂鸦的就手臂我他假不把腿抓了都太多些和我他假不对儿都是两只卡就佛的我压了起配扎了开配和对手丢出都黑要丢出的在菜我家草都黑这是别人来看的卡就佛一周几配个波特假不波赛局就丢出了别主给可看下彩色的大个都和读书高不家人来和Keep up to turn catch over down去把腿别压不着 K 加色这否的delta J 收下不这否把条这乱色就还给着的就色 K 了带hiệu就拆条抄都还贴着多热的就手臂打起 K 了大我不讲把腿抓着就都太多些和就车都贴家就车的这是这了都和别晒到他不表不加了玻璃还可给抓着的这了都和主臂还抽大我的还给的就抽臂的这是都是开了这份卡球佛抓着波他加波的开了都推起比表不举俩太If you want to see the list of translated characters and radicals, along with all of my sources and a couple of scripts I wrote to help speed up the translation process, there's a link to my GitHub in the description.
Okay, so I'm going to give my final comment, which is like, this is pretty cool, right? But I won't say this is cursed. Creativity, I give it an 80. It's pretty creative, right? And then phonology and writing system, no. Phonology is fine, I guess, but the tones, yeah, that's like pre-cursed. Writing system is pinyin, which is of course cursed and disgusting. And then I don't think there's much to say about the grammar and syntax, but that's just Mandarin Chinese, which I think is like it's not that interesting because it's literally just a relix of Mandarin Chinese but pronounced differently. I mean, it's literally Mandarin Chinese but pronounced differently, right? You don't pronounce the characters based on the pronunciation derived from Middle Chinese or Old Chinese, for example. You just pronounce them based on how they're written. So, yeah, I watched this video before. This, of course, isn't my initial reaction, but I don't think it's that good, to be honest. But their pronunciation is certainly something, so I guess I'll give them points to that. If I were to rate this out of 10, I'll give it a 6.